right, we'll get started on this. This is, says, I think, how to keep a series interesting in the book. It's actually more just on maximizing a series overall. Obviously, keeping it interesting is a huge part of that. My name's Allan. I write mostly science fiction, and I say mostly because I do have one fantasy book that resides somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle of Oblivion, but I've done a lot of series. I've been doing this for a little over 7 years, which, you know, in the industry as a whole is no big deal. It kind of makes me a fossil as indie authors go, though, so made a lot of mistakes, and that's usually how you learn things, but some of what I'm going to say is, might seem a little basic, and I normally hate when people repeat the obvious of these kinds of things, but I think one of the things with the series is sitting down and thinking about all this before you start, because it's easy to just go one step at a time, and you make it a lot more difficult on yourself, and you make it a lot harder to have a success. So hopefully these are going to be a lot of things that you'll keep in mind when you're conceiving a new series. Obviously everything I say is not going to apply to everybody. Like I said, I write science fiction. I could go on forever and just invent new stuff. If you know, write romance or something else, if your readers want a happy ending in one book, you're going to be a little more creative about how you make a series. But, you know, generally speaking, I think the power of doing a series has become extraordinary. And for authors, and again, I approach this from a very professional point of view. Yes, I'm an author, I'm a creative, I think I'm creative, but I also analyze everything and try to do things, and try to give my readers what they want, and I want my career to succeed, and I find it much more difficult to do that if I'm not writing a series, for a variety of reasons. So why a series? Series just sell better. Well, sells better is here. This is the crappy PowerPoint that I threw together in about an hour or so. But they do sell better in most genres, just for a variety of reasons we're going to talk about. But, you know, the second one on this list is something to think about. Readers like series. I mean, you know, sometimes we get these conversations like, well, we're going to do this series because we're going to make more money on it. It's easier to market and promote, and people will buy more of them. But people are buying more of them because they want it. I mean, you're not breaking into their house and saying, you have to buy book 17 right now. So remember that. You know, readers like series because it's a big investment. I mean, I use Game of Thrones as an example, and no one's going to tell me that the American public en masse is dying for dark, gritty fantasy. Yet it was a phenomenon, but it was a long series that went on for a long time and grew on itself. And, you know, that shows the power. If that was one movie that HBO made and showed 2 hours one night, it would not have been what it became. I mean, I think that's fairly obvious. I mean, and that's something to think about, you know, when you're trying to develop a reader base and everything. Series can grow as they continue. They don't, a lot of times they shrink as they continue, and that's a problem, but that does not have to be the case and should not be the case. So, and there's another reason to write series is they work better with advertising and promotion. And I'm just going to say this right now. I find advertising to be a difficult thing to make work. It's hard, it's expensive. Almost every source that you can buy advertising on is overpriced for what it delivers. So how do you adapt to that? Well, if you're marketing one standalone $5 book, you're making $3.50 on that. If you spend more than $3.50 on advertising to sell that book, you're losing money. Maybe you're getting a reader who'll read your completely unrelated other book, but that's a very tenuous hope to justify spending a lot more on an ad budget. If you sell book one of a 10-book series, and even if book one's 99 cents, that the rest of the books are $5 each, you're talking about something in the order of over $45 in sales, 70% of which you get. It is a lot more feasible to go out there and advertise and get a new reader if you can spend $20 or $30 to do it, as opposed to trying to do it for like $3 or something like that. Now, not everybody reads book one, going to read the whole series, obviously, so it's not that you can spend $45, but just think about it that way. You know, you're going to get people into a series, and if they like it, and I hate to say something like this because it's taking it for granted, but they're almost automatically going to buy the next books if you make sure they're aware that they exist. If they buy book one and they like it, selling them book two is much easier. If they like book two, they're really hooked. So they're gonna buy book 3, they're gonna buy book 4, they'll probably sign up for your email lists, a lot of them. It's gonna get easier as it goes along, but at least there's more of a gain, and it makes the kinds of promotion and advertising you might do to build your reader base a lot more feasible. I don't know how you would promote a standalone book in today's market without losing your shirt. I just don't know. So. A series also have a constant entry point and funnel. I mean, you can market that book 1. I am going to put out book 15 of a series on December 3rd, and I will be reducing the price of book 1 to 99 cents and doing a lot of advertising on it. I've been doing this for a long time with it now, and every time I do, I get new people to come into the series and replace any that I lose. So you have to remember that you might be putting out further books down the series, but you always have that book 1, and sooner or later that book 1 sold enough, you've made what you've made on it, and now it's almost a tool. You don't care if you make any money on it as long as you feed people into the series. So that's something to always keep in mind as well. And a series can be easier and quicker to write. I'm not going to step on the landmine of telling anybody to write faster, but there is no argument. If you do write faster, you will have a better chance of success because, you know, I try to get out a book every 2 months. I don't manage that. I'm probably more like every 10 weeks. And I get people, when's the next book coming out? When's the next book coming out? People have short attention spans, probably shorter now than they've ever been. And, you know, so this isn't about writing quickly, but when you have a series and you have developed characters that you're familiar with and you have settings that you're familiar with and you've sketched out some idea where you want your whole series to go, it is easier to write. I mean, to me, I think it's going to almost, for most people, be quicker to write a book 3 or a book 5 than it was book 1 when you're trying to find your way into who these characters are and what their situation is. So just, you know, keep that in mind as well as something that's helpful. Maybe it lets you get another book out in a year, and that's got its own benefit aside from all the series benefits. So I said readers like series. They get attached to characters and settings, and they'll cry like babies if you kill one of them. I mean, if your genre allows that. Blissfully mine does, but you know. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you know, killing characters, if you're in a genre where that is an appropriate thing to do, does help you create suspense because, you know, if you killed one once, you might do it again. So when you leave somebody at the end of a chapter hanging off the precipice, their fingernails are scraping down, they don't know whether they're going to survive or not. You know, so that's something to think about too, keeping the suspense throughout the series. A series can be a deeper, longer, more intense story too. I mean, think about, again, Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Star Trek, all these great franchises. These stories weren't done in, you know, a 1-hour television show or a 2-hour movie or even a big, thick book. They're done over multiple volumes. People come to love these characters because they keep going back to them and seeing them again in different situations. So when you're thinking of characters for a book, you want to think about that. This isn't a character for a one-shot book. This is a character that I'm going to write about for a long time. He's got to be interesting enough. She has to be interesting enough. Has to have enough possible things to do that people are going to stay interested in him, and I'm going to stay interested in him to write him. And, you know, not just one character, but more characters. Series books can be broad-based too. You have a lot more things going on. My books happen to have a lot of storylines going on. They're pretty broad as well as deep, so you can do that in a series because, again, you're not trying to resolve one thing in, you know, 100,000 words or something of that nature. So. And people like it because it's easier to read something new. I mean, people are lazy. I'm put myself at the top of that list. If I see a series that I kind of like, and I can read book 4, and I know everything that's going on, or I have to wrap my head around a book 1, especially since I started writing, which writing has destroyed my reading life, but I'm going to go for the easy route a lot of times if I like it. Now, if I'm bored with it and I don't like it anymore, no, I'm not going to, but you know, it's just, you give people the easiest path, and they want that. So you're giving your customer, you know, what they want, as long as you're keeping it interesting, which we're going to, you know, get to. Series sell better, right? Everything in the previous slide applies. Readers who like a book in the series are very likely to read the next. There are tools to help, like Amazon series pages. Don't forget, you know, keeping those up to date, and they can be difficult sometimes, so they don't always add your book automatically, so make sure that your book gets added. I can also tell you for a while, maybe 6 months ago, they were knocking my series page down for 2 days every time they added a new book, and that was always right at launch, so that was really nice. And so I got to the point where I wasn't adding my new book to the series until after the launch, which But always keep an eye on things like that because, you know, I actually love Amazon. I'm not an Amazon basher, but technical things happen, problems happen, and you always want to keep an eye on that because you don't want to botch a launch on a series because you're now working with a more valuable asset that you've built over a period of time. You've invested a lot of yourself and your time into it. You invested a little money into it, maybe marketing it. You really don't want to have book 5's launch become a debacle. So, you know, always pay attention to things like that. And then I say everything on the next slide, which is series work better with ads and promo. I talked about this briefly before, but it all comes down to the greater value of a new reader. We all want to think that somebody reads my one book about something and loves it so much, they're going to immediately go read my book in a different genre that I wrote because I wanted to write that. But realistically, I'll find that even people that rave about a series, when you write something new, when you start something new, half of them buy it right away, and the other half you have to drag them. So in the middle of a series, though, all you really need to do is come out with the next book. I mean, I put my releases on deep in a series now are very, I do some promotion, but all the promotion's on book 1. I don't even really have to promote the new book. And you want to get yourself in that situation where you're thinking, okay, book 8 is an automatic sell, as long as I make people aware of it. So I'm going to put all my promotional effort into book 1 and feed more people into this series, and then sell more copies of 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And you know, you can keep a series going for a very, very long time, and we'll talk about how long in a minute. Release of new books raises the profile of existing books. It does it a little bit probably to all of your books, but believe me, when you launch a book in a series, the books previous to that all get a boost. You're going to get the last book that came out, all the people who missed your promo, missed your email list, send on that, are going to say, oh wow, book 5 came out, and you're advertising book 6 now, but you remind them of book 5, and you'll see a spike in that. So that's another good thing with the series, that each book that you add makes the series stronger. It's because it's longer, but it also makes it stronger because it reminds people of the previous books. It's another chance to reach somebody. And also the more books you get ahead of sometimes people, there's a lot of people who may not buy a book 2 right away because they don't want to read it and then wait. You know, a lot of times they're thinking it'll be a year for book 3 or something like that, or will there be a book 3? Now they look and say, oh wow, he's up to 6, I'm going to read now. And you'll get a lot of that as you go, and you'll see it in spurts in your sales. As you launch new books at certain points, you're going to get different people that, you know, or they just had things going on in their life, they were busy, they come back. So you have this ongoing, living, breathing asset, which is something that a single book just can't match. And there's just greater reader commitment and loyalty too. I mean, like the series I'm writing now, and I'm not above killing a pretty significant character here and there. But like if I took the main character of the series and killed him now, I think my readers would put a hit out on me. You know, so you can't get that kind of attachment most of the time. You have to be one hell of a writer if you're going to get that kind of attachment to characters in one book. But when people feel they've lived with this person, they've been reading the books for months and years even, and new adventures and new aspects to it, you really build a bond that is, I mean, you know, I don't care whether it's do you like Captain Kirk or Captain Picard, but the fact that we're talking about those 2 years later is not because they were each in one standalone book. So, you know, we talked about a lot of this. It's just prequel. There are alternate ways to add entry points as the series gets longer too. You can do prequels. You can do deep dives into character. I just started a trilogy for one of my, I wouldn't say secondary characters, but not the primary character in my ongoing series. And I did a sort of a prequel trilogy I started about her. So it's ways to do different things, and if you position these things right and you think about it, especially prequel type things, they can be alternate entry points into the series. Maybe someone who saw your book 1 for whatever reason, the cover, the description, you know, their mood that day, it didn't catch their attention, but maybe the prequel catches their attention and then they read it and then they move into the main series. So you have a lot of tools, more than we can talk about, you know, here in 45 minutes, but you have a lot of tools and ways as a series gets bigger and more substantial to strengthen it and to bring new people into it, and also to use the strength of it to just branch off in different areas. I have one series that has a sequel, a successor series that came after it. It's just set some distance in the future in the same timeline. And then I have another spin-off in that series that is following a group of ships that got cut off from and lost. So it's basically the Lost Fleet, which is a little bit tired and overdone, but I have my own version of it, so. And that did very, very well. And it was a way to keep it fresh and interesting. People were attached to that series and some of those characters that ended up, being in the Lost Fleet. But it was a totally way to go off in a different direction and to create something new other than going forward the same timeline. And you want to think that way about your series. You're not writing a book, you're not writing a bunch of books, you're not even really writing a series. You're creating, universe is a very science fiction word to use, a setting. There can be all kinds of different spin-offs and ways that you go, ways that you broaden it. Even think about television shows that spin off, where a character on a popular show gets spun off into another show. And you can do things very much like that as well. And you can react to fan interest that way too. Say you have a secondary character that you get a feeling from your Facebook group, from the emails you get from the reviews, is very popular. Maybe branch that character off into a companion series or a spin-off series. Again, I'm just throwing out ideas because what you really need to be able to do is look at your own work and your own situation and think creatively like this and try to come up with the best ways to take advantage of what you've created and present it to the reader in a way that they'll be engaged and want to see it. And always remember, generally speaking, unless you're doing phony descriptions and trying to cheat somebody, whatever makes you money and enhances your career is only doing that because your reader's responding to it, they're buying it, they're reading it on KU, whatever they're doing. And as long as you're promoting it honestly and you're not trying to game any system like that, you and your reader are actually totally in line, because the more your readers like what you're doing and get engaged in it, even and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but even if you get a little bored with it, if your readers are still engaged, that's where you look at yourself and say, well, I'm a professional, maybe there's a restaurant in your town you like, Luigi's, they have the best veal parm in the world. You go there twice a week and get it, all your friends go there and get it. I'll bet that chef is so sick to death of making veal parm. But if he came in one day and said, no, I'm going to make you, hamburger instead, you'd be unhappy. So we're in a little bit of a weird bind, because if you're really burned out on something, you're not going to be able to do a good job, and then it's time to walk away. But we are professionals, so maybe we get past the point where we're as excited as we were at the beginning, but if we're not losing readers, if we're still getting good reviews, if we're still getting emails from readers and people are still excited and enthusiastic about it, that's where you really want to continue with it and keep it interesting if you're able. Obviously, like I said, writing isn't quite like sweeping the floor. You can't just do it whether you want to or not. You might be out of ideas on something, but you really have to be honest with yourself and say, can I dig down and think of ways to do this? A lot of series, there's ways to put a twist into it, or you finish one storyline, we'll talk about that in a minute too. Keep it interesting, but just again, don't buy into this notion that because you have a very long series, you're phoning it in, you're beating it to death, you're taking advantage of the reader, because if the reader didn't want to read it, they wouldn't buy it. So, I think that's one thing you have to always remember. And then one other advantage to the series I have here is the ability to aggressively discount book one. Again, I think you'll find, like me, I look at a book one, I try to make money on a book one when I launch it. Sometimes I'll launch it cheap, but most of the time I'll try to do pretty well on it. At some point, I don't care anymore if I make any money on book one, I'll sell it for 99 cents. I've never been a huge fan of the effectiveness of free books, but if they work for you, give it away free. Who cares? If you're feeding people into a series that's now 5 books long, 6 books long, 7 books long, and if they read all those books, they're going to be bound to you much more tightly than they ever could be reading one of your books. What do you care if you make money on book one? It now becomes a marketing tool. It's the entry ramp into the series. And that's what's nice about it too, because you're making your money on subsequent books and on the newest book. And that's one of the advantages from a business point of view. I talked about series can be quicker to write already for a variety of reasons. Okay, C word, craft. I actually hate that word. I think it's kind of effective, but I think it means something that I'm trying to say here that I couldn't think of anything else to say. Writing series is everything a book is, but there's more on top of that. Obviously a book, you need a good series, you need great characters, You need to engage the reader, you need to probably catch their attention early. All those things apply, of course, to the first book of a series. But you also need to know where you're going. Now, I'm going to be honest, I have had series before where I just wrote a book one and it sold a whole bunch, so then I said, okay, it's a series now. That's not the best way to do it. If you're creative enough and you squirm enough and you're in a, and again, my genre saves me on that because it's very easy for me to turn something into a series. If you write fantasy, it's pretty easy to turn something into a series. Some genres are a little bit harder, but I think now that we're talking about series, first of all, if I was giving advice to anybody trying to become an author or to become a more successful author, to build a career, I would almost without exception say you should only write series. I mean, I have some standalone ideas I'd like to write too, and I can tell you some of my co-authors that I spend time with, a couple of them have been talking the same thing about what a waste of time standalones are. Again, from a business point of view, you have a book you're dying to write because you love it and you want to tell the story. I'm not telling you not to do that. My presentation is about you want to make a living. You know, I'm worried that you pay the mortgage payment. If you want in your free time to write a book that's not going to sell as well, but might be a great book, and maybe it will catch on, by all means. But like, I think most people are trying to make it a profession. They're trying to go from day jobs to being full-time writers, and honestly, that means selling books. And I don't think I do anyone any favors if I don't tell them what I think would be the best way for people to sell books. So that's why I approach it from that point of view. I'm not trying to step on anybody's dream that they have some kind of eccentric type of an idea or an interesting idea or a great idea that doesn't fit what I'm saying today. I'm not telling you not to write it. I'm talking about the things you do to build a career that you can support your family with, and that's why I want to make that clear. I'm not saying don't ever do something else. I'm just saying, to me, this is what I've learned helps build a career. So, keeping someone through multiple books requires more emphasis on writing and craft than a standalone book. It's just, you know, you've got to keep people interested. You've got to make them want to read that next book. I feel, as a writer, it's easier to come up with a story that just resolves and it's done, and I don't have to worry about what happens after. It's a little harder to write a good series, to really think about what's going to happen next. And I'm going to say this, and I cannot say this strongly enough, and again, this is just my opinion and my experience with readers. I don't think most readers like cliffhangers, and I don't think most readers, I know most readers don't like someone wrote a 1,000,000-word story and cut it into 10 pieces. You know, like it was a big Stromboli or something like that. I know readers don't like that, most of them. That doesn't mean there's no readers that like it, but you do things like that, you will get bad reviews, you will get complaints, you will lose people in a series, and they're all three things you absolutely do not want. So remember that your series is one big story, but it's also made up of individual stories, and every one of those books should come with a storyline, it's of its own, and an end. Doesn't have to be the end of the bigger story, and we're going to go into that in a little more detail, but just don't think you're just going to write one giant long book and you know, you gotta, and this makes it much harder, because how do I write a complete story that resolves but leaves all kinds of unresolved things to continue the series? It takes a lot of thought, a lot of planning. You really have to understand where you're going with that. So before you start, think that through. Like, how am I going to give especially book one, you don't give them a satisfactory conclusion to book one and they're grumpy at the end of book one. That's not the best situation to bring them on to book two. So always focus on that. And how can I have storylines that sort of resolve, but, and I'm going to tell you how I do it in a minute. But yeah, how can you do that and bring them on to the next book? And not have them upset because, wow, you didn't resolve this for me. So, and I think easy not to worry about how to standalone a series is your problem. That's the other thing too. You can leave yourself a real problem at the end of a book that's hard to resolve. I mean, wow, you know, the reader's like, how's he going to get out of this situation? And you have no idea either. So, you know, and how many things do we see? And, you know, I mentioned Star Trek before. They're pretty guilty of this too, where let's just make up something like, you know, some text-sounding word, and that's how we're going to get out of this. And that's bad storytelling. Don't do that. People don't like it. I don't think most people like it. So, you know, so you need that successful quasi-conclusion, but also keeping things going over the long term. All right, so type of series, and this is one of the things I wanted to touch on how you do this. This is something I've sort of come up with in my own thinking over the years I've been doing this now. Series are different animals, and I think instead of being one thing or another, they usually exist on a scale. Episodic, to me, is like, okay, the characters are the same, the setting is the same, but one episode has nothing to do with another. Okay, like think of a sitcom on television, most of them. I mean, you could jumble them up, watch season 5 and then season 1, except maybe somebody's hair looks a little different, nothing's different. You don't get confused, you don't get lost. That would be purely episodic. You know, then you can move toward an ongoing narrative, which is really like a story of grand scope. Even though there are individual stories making it up, you're like, right, it's the fall of the Galactic Empire or something like that. You know, it's a big ongoing, you know, thing. And then there's all kinds of steps in between. Think of sitcoms like Big Bang Theory. Characters get married, or their situation changed a little bit. For the most part, they're all individual episodic stories. And you can move along that path all the way over, and somewhere on there is where you're going to be comfortable writing. Now, if you write detective stories, you might trend more toward the episodic, because, let's be honest, every book's going to be another mystery he resolves or another crime that he resolves. Same thing with, you know, spy novels. You'll see lots of series and a lot of big old school bestsellers that are very much like that. They have 20, 30 books in a series. It's the same character, but they don't have a lot to do with each other. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the kind of thing that can work better for authors in genres like romance and stuff, where, you know, I've seen romance series where, okay, everyone has to resolve pretty much with a happy ending by the time it's done, but maybe there's a bunch of brothers and they each have one story or something like that, you know, or a bunch of sisters or something like that. There's a lot of ways to do it. You know, we're supposed to be creative, so you really have to be creative to do that, but there's interplay, because what happened in book 1, now that couple's together and maybe they're trying to, you know, get the other couple together or something like that. Again, I'm not going to give you a lot of romance advice, because I think I'd be a horrible romance author, but just trying to, you know, reflect on the fact that every genre is different, and you have to take these ideas, any of them that you think are valuable, but you have to make them your own and adapt them to the realities that you understand of your readers and your genre. The one thing I would give as general advice is I definitely think readers respond better if it's not purely episodic. In other words, maybe the detective gets older. Maybe he remembers the thing he did 3 books ago. Maybe he has relationships change, or, you know, maybe he has a limp now because he got shot in the last book or something like that. I do think that helps cultivate reader interest and attachment to a character when they see them moving through time, as opposed to being like frozen in time, like everybody knows MASH, the old TV show. I mean, Korean War was, what, 2.5 years long? I think they had like 14 Thanksgivings on MASH. You know, it gets a little surreal after a while, and I think if you really want to get that reader attachment to things, I think that's one thing you really want to do, is at least show a little time going by, throw a nod to your previous stories that, you know, hopefully people have read. The advantage of series as they get more episodic is it's pretty easy for someone to jump in at any point. Someone can read book 10, wow, I like this. Oh my God, there's 9 other books. That's a great day for you, because then you sell 9 books that day, so. And well, I think accommodations, most series probably lie somewhere on a point between these two types. I'd say mine do. Mine definitely trend more toward the ongoing narrative, but I do very much try to tell an individual story in each one, so there's some episodic quality to it, so I'm probably like 80% of the way over on this. Everybody's going to be in a different place. Characters, okay, everybody's going to beat to death with characters in any writing workshop, because they're probably the most important thing, no matter what. And they're important in series too. They're more important in series, because now this character doesn't have to get you through one interesting book. It has to attach them enough that they're going to buy 5 books, 10 books, 12 books, 15 books from you, whatever, however long it's going to be. So keep the character development going. It's really easy to focus on it in book 1, and I'm introducing my hero, and he's this, he's tall, he's whatever, he's whatever he is, whatever your series is. And it's easy to let that slip out of your mind as you go on, and not to continue the development. And continuing development means maybe revealing other details about him you simply didn't reveal in the first book. But it also means changing his situation. I mean, you know, again, depending on the type of series you're in, maybe his friend got killed in the last book, and it changes his outlook and his personality. And now he's vengeful, he's angry, he's bitter. That could come from a lot of courses. It doesn't have to be from somebody being killed. But I mean, think about that. You're taking people for a long journey with someone, and if you don't change the character at all, if you don't adapt him, if you don't continue to develop him, he's going to get boring sooner or later. And you don't want that. And the more you change it, you make people feel sorry for him if they like him. If it's a character people that readers love, tug at their heartstrings a little bit. Put him in a bad situation. Like I said, if his friend was killed, or if his wife or girlfriend was killed, or if her husband or boyfriend was killed, or something like that. You know, and revenge in a lot of books, like spy books, thrillers, science fiction, fantasy, that can be a motivator for a part of a series. That could be something that maybe that character getting a grip on himself again later becomes another change. And again, these are just specific ideas I'm using as examples. They're not, I'm not saying do exactly that, but just try to think like, does the reader know anything about my character at the end of book 10 that he didn't know at the end of book 1? Because if that's the case, I think you want to look back on that and say, why is that? And maybe just, always remind yourself to do that. Especially, like I said, when a series isn't purely episodic. Continue to change their outlook, skill sets, points of view, relationships. Real people change over time, so should your characters. God knows I approach writing differently than I did 7 years ago. If I was writing a book about myself writing, I would change. So, that's an important thing to keep in mind with your characters. Not insular as well, they're developed as much by interactions as anything. So it could be, that could be a romance, camaraderie, like I said, a savage and overwhelming thirst for revenge. Don't forget to make your characters play nicely or otherwise with each other. And that's what I'm saying is the development of characters can be the relationship with each other. Do two friends have a falling out? Think all those things, and if you start thinking of them, there's hundreds of them, but just remember that's what real life is like, that's what real people are like, and that's what your characters should be like. And then let's put this snakes. Why do they have to be snakes? I mean, everybody knows Indiana Jones, right? Okay? Don't forget the little things about your character. You want to attach readers to your characters? That's a way to do it. Yes, it's the big things, the huge events in their lives, but don't forget, real people, your friends, the people in your life that you know, they all have their things. Here's I have one friend who's 55 years old, and I don't think in the 40 years I've known him, I've ever seen him eat anything but pizza or a hamburger. Okay? So I was writing about him, I mentioned that, because that's kind of a specific fact. Indiana Jones was afraid of snakes, which actually, if you watched all the movies, later on they got to explain why he's afraid of snakes. Which was, again, a great tool that having that little foil, that meant nothing to the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark that he was afraid of snakes. But it was a really interesting point. I mean, he brushes the spiders off the guys, nothing's bothering him, he's in this musty old temple, he's evading traps, and then he's scared of the snakes. So, think about that, your characters. They have to be real people. And this is important in any book, I think, but it's really important in a series. Because just think of, your main characters are like Atlas carrying the world in the series. I mean, these are people that have to keep a reader interested for 5 books, or 10 books, or 20 books. I could show you a series that, even there have been whole trade pub series that have characters that are 30, 40 books long. I mean, you really want to make these characters something that your readers start to think of as real people. And real people aren't cardboard cutouts. They're afraid of, I'm scared of heights, okay? I also hate raisins, okay? If I was a character, you'd mention that sometime. And I would get constantly annoyed because there's some kind of conspiracy in the world to slip raisins into almost every food we're served. But you do something about the character. It's a little humor about the character. It's humanizing for the character. And it really does work if it's done right. It really makes people very attached to those characters. And like I said, don't forget flaws. And don't be afraid to make those flaws come back and bite somebody. I mean, I might have some anti-hero types in some of my books. I mean, does a character have a dark past? Is he trying to redeem himself? It's a little bit of a trope, but it also can be done very well. Does he have a blind spot? Does he have a bad temper? I've read books where the main character is a drug addict or an alcoholic. I'm not suggesting that you give your characters this litany of problems to overcome, but just sometimes remember they're real people, and unless your genre is something like where he's, I don't know, like a Superman type superhero and he's never had an impure thought in his life, you want to show a little of that. It makes them feel more real, and it really helps people become more attached to them. I'm going to go a little faster because we're running low on time. Rich and expansive settings. Now, the other thing I'll say about after characters is the settings. Important in any book, of course, but super important in series, okay? I don't care whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or Game of Thrones or anything that's been a huge hit. Up there with the characters has been the setting and the universe, for lack of a better word. So, like I said, Game of Thrones effect. World building at its most pronounced when dealing with a long and ongoing series. You have time to develop things on a much deeper level. You have histories, you have customs, past relationships between characters. You know, it's the dreaded info dump looms over you when you try to do things like that in a single book. But when you have multiple books, don't forget to keep feeding in the backstory. Don't make it like, 18 pages straight of like the history of your world. But don't forget to keep doing that as you go on with the books. It will bind the readers to the series more. The more they know, the more they'll want to know. And think about how HBO did that with Game of Thrones. When a new season would come out, they'd take us somewhere else in that world. And I was, we're going, to Dorne this season, and everybody's very excited about it. And, that's the kind of thing. Don't forget that your universe is also a character, especially in a series. And again, those of us doing things like science fiction, fantasy, even historical fiction. I remember a series when I was a kid. John Jakes was the author. It was a whole family throughout American history. I think it probably went over 100, 150 years of time. There's a lot of different ways to slice up and dice a series, but you get to develop things. If you're doing something based in real history, maybe you're sometimes revealing things more than developing them. I mean, if your character's in the Civil War, you're going to tell something about the Civil War in your book and develop it a little bit, and some of your readers may be more familiar with it than others or not. If you're inventing a history, that's a different thing, but you always make it interesting and make sure that you keep it going. And like I said, with settings, you got 1 million words, use them. If you're going to write 10 books and they're 100,000 words each, that's 1 million words. You got that is a tremendous tool for you, both for characters and for settings, to create them at a level that someone writing 1 or 2 books can never ever match. You just need the time to do it. And you need not only the words in a pure mathematical sense, but again, the time to do it in a way that reads well. In other words, where you're not starting with a 75-page prologue about the history of your world. That I would never suggest doing that. But the people who run around screaming about info dumps take too much out sometimes too. Your reader really wants to learn about your world, and if you look at all the famous franchises that exist both in books and movies and TV shows, the worlds are very well developed. Their histories, their the Star Trek, the Klingons, at least in the beginning, they were the enemy. I mean, there was a history, and you had time, and it was developed more as time went by. And that's something you should always think about your series. That's what your series lets you do. Series isn't just writing a lot of books. It lets you do things you couldn't otherwise do. So, different books in a series, and different books in a series, by the way, can focus a little more on certain characters than others. I do this a lot. You gotta be careful with it, because if you basically don't discuss all the characters that your readers love, and you just go off on a tangent, they're probably not going to like it. But I definitely have books where my main character is less involved, and I'll be introducing another character, or I'll have another character that's more subordinate, who has a much bigger part in that book, and the main character has a slightly smaller part. And that mixes things up, and it's a little bit interesting too. You're not following one person around all the time. And you can even sort of, over time, end up with multiple main, maybe start with one sort of main character as the primary focus, but over multiple books, some other ones develop, and now maybe you actually have a couple that are kind of have equal billing. So when the movie gets made, they can fight over who gets the first credit, but, that's something to think about too. The way you keep a series from getting boring is to change things, and let some time go by. Like my series I'm working on now, like I said, I'm about to put out book 15. About 20 years of time has elapsed in those 15 books. I think the situation has changed somewhat, and different storylines have come in, and I think you need to always remember that, because it is very easy to start being repetitive with a series and basically phoning it in. And as a professional writer, you're going to find that so easy to do and kind of seductive, because you can just almost do it unconsciously. And you got to keep going into every book like it's a brand new book. How can I make it interesting? What new can I introduce in this setting or with these characters that's going to be interesting, that's something new that takes us in a different direction? You lose readers if you let them get bored. So This is something I did here, this lovely graphic I created here. But what I always try to do is, I call it interlaced storylines. That's a dumb name, but it's just, you know. What I try to do is every single book is a story, okay? I'll admit, when I'm in double digits, if I'm book 12 and book 12 isn't quite as much a complete story, by that time they're so into the long-term story, it's a little less important, but still bad to do. I always try to make it a complete story. And then I have, if I'm going to do a very long series, I have what I call level 2 stories. So, you know, level 1 story is whatever happens in the book. A level 2 story is something that takes 3 books, 4 books, 6 books to resolve, and then it gets resolved. So, like, maybe book 1 focuses around a new recruit going off to war, and it's his adapting to that and surviving his first, you know, encounter or something of that nature. Maybe the level 2 story is that particular war coming to an end. And now there's a period of peace, and you introduce something different. Maybe there's some new thing happening for a new level 2 story that's now going to take several books. And then, of course, there's a full series plot line, you know, which is basically what your whole series is about. So, this is just something I put out there. I think people should keep it in mind, because this is how you keep it interesting. You give people resolution every story. You give them a bigger resolution after a certain number of books. And then, of course, when the series is finished, you give them a big resolution. I think thinking about it this way, and you'll make your own version of this, and you'll twist it around, you'll change it. It doesn't have to be just like this. But you have to remember, when you're going on and on and on, and the series is very long, you've really got to keep it interesting. So you're going to want to put subordinate storylines, tangential storylines. You're going to want to put things in it to keep it going. So always think of it like this, like, is this series a group of trilogies? Something like that. And that's a good way for you to discipline yourself into keeping enough going on and enough new going on to keep it interesting. So I just have some, I don't really have time for these, but spin-offs I talked about earlier. And the other thing I say is listen to what readers tell you. I know a lot of people don't like to read their own reviews. I think writers should, but specifically with a series, you're building a big asset here. You're going to be something you might be working on for years. You really want to pay attention to what people like and what they don't like. That doesn't mean listen to one nasty, pointless review that some angry person left. But if you see 5 people saying, I'd like to see more of this, or less of this, or this was repetitive, or that didn't, I was a little confused by this, pay attention to those things, because the series, you can get it, you can do it as future books go on. And you can even go kind of backtrack a little and say, they didn't know enough about this character, they wanted to know more about him. All of a sudden, guess what? I have a new book. I can tell them more about them. So that's a great way to do it. And remember, in the end, it's all about your readers. If they like what you're doing, your series will be a success. And if not, the message is clear. Fix it. Do it better next time. I mean, if you want to build a career, 90% of you, it's going to be based on series. That's just the indie world. I think it's even the traditional publishing world now. I can tell you the traditional publishers I worked with are only pretty much interested in series now, in a lot of genres too, because it's just what works right now. It's what readers want. So, so we haven't actually managed to get through all that. I'm glad. I wasn't sure I was going to. So I think we can do a couple questions. I think we have a few minutes.
We have 1 minute.
1 minute? All right. Who's got a good question?
So when you had the graphic up towards the end, we talked about the full plotline stories and sub-stories and that stuff. That makes sense that you would have the end of the protagonist's character arc at the end of the series, if you have a definite stopping point. But if you're writing something indefinite in a series, how would you handle that? Would you complete the arc, or would you just let it go on?
Right, in case everybody couldn't hear, I was saying, the way I had the whole series storyline, but what if you don't know where your series is going to end up? And that's definitely a valid question. First thing I would say, probably, if you have the opportunity, if you're planning a new series from scratch, and you're not just, oh wow, this book sold a lot, I'm going to turn it into a series now. If you can have some idea where you want to end up, it's a good thing. I mean, like, look at the first trilogy of Star Wars movies. I mean, they were going to end up with the Empire falling. They knew that. I mean, if that was 10 movies, it would have ended the same way. And I'm not going to go into anything else about Star Wars, but, if you have an idea where you're going, it's going to help you write that story, and it's going to help you proportionalize your subordinate storylines. But if you don't know, you don't know. Just come as close as you can. Have some idea where you're heading, but the important aspect of it is not necessarily know where you're going to end 10 books later as, just remember, it's a series, it's not a book. Every book should be a story, but don't make people wait 10 or 12 or 15 books for some kind of feel-good or satisfying, heavier resolution than a book. You know, try to have, and it could even just be a subordinate storyline that wraps up, and while everything else is continuing in a straight line. But just remember, because the kind of thing that makes people write to each other, like, oh, he's just phoning these in now, is when you're just sort of plodding along and nothing new's coming in and nothing is being resolved. And every book sort of feels like a slightly different version of the last book. I mean, that's series cancer. That's what you don't want. I mean, I can tell you, I'm not going to say any, but I can tell you a couple of writers I like a lot, and I've read some series, and these are all traditionally published ones. There are a couple series that are just so written into the ground, and you can tell he's so disinterested in it, and he just keeps writing because he gets paid for it. And, you know, you don't want to do that. You can keep a series interesting for a very long time if you put your creativity into it. And I think that we're done. Thank you.